Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe visits Moscow to hold talks with Russian President Vladimir Putin, intending to push forward with discussions on their territorial dispute, which has seen absolutely no progress for more than 70 years. However, Russia stern stance threw cold water on Tokyo's hopes for a quick return of the disputed islands in the Pacific, warning Japan that it must recognize them as part of Russia's territory as a starting point for talks. As fast-paced dynamics have placed Japan in the cradle of unpredictability, with Washington's unusual approach to this clingy Asian ally and the Korean Peninsula swinging back and forth between its old quasi-war scenario and the new age of peace. So will Abe-Putin talks lead to a resolution of the islands dispute? Will the U.S. set more barriers in this process? And how will Japan adjust itself in the dynamic changing Asia-Pacific region? To discuss these and other issues concerning Abe's intentions in the Northeast Asia, I am pleased to have Rong Ying, Vice President of China Institute of International Studies, and Harvey Zordin, Senior Fellow at the Center for China and Globalization, in the studio. We shall also talk to Pavel Falkenhorst, Russian defense analyst at Moscow, and Takasato Watanabe, Professor Emeritus at Deutsche University via satellite. That's our topic. This is Dialogue. I'm Yang Rui. Welcome to Dialogue. Mr. Rong, many show their reasonable pessimism about the outcome, if any, coming out of the summit meeting between Putin and Shinzo Abe. I'd like to have your thoughts.
Well, indeed, I think there are speculations that this visit may not produce something big. But there are also, I think, hope that it may help push the relationship between Japan and Russia. Remember, I think for the past 6 years, since 2013, when Shinzo Abe, Prime Minister of Japan, started talks with Russia, Vladimir Putin, President Putin, for the normalization, for the concluding of this treaty, more than 20 rounds of talks has been taken place. And this is the 25th summit meeting. And there are a lot of preparation and speculations. And in the hope that it would help push the relation to a new high, or to a new starting point. From Japanese perspective, that definitely makes sense, because Prime Minister Abe has made it very clear in his New Year's address, this year is going to be the year for diplomacy for Japan. It is focusing on the improvement of the relationship with Russia. I mean, hopefully that it will, by concluding the peace treaty, and also it would, push the China-Japan relationship for a new era. And in June this year, Shinzo Abe is going to play host the G20 summit meeting in Osaka. So it's going to be a big year diplomatically. But of course, domestically, there are a lot of events. I mean, the abdication of the emperor, and of course, the next year where Japan is going to host the Summer Olympic Games.
But Harvey, are you optimistic and hopeful that 2019 promises to be a big year for Japan's diplomacy?
Do you believe in miracles, Yan Rui?
It depends.
Well, I think that it's going to be a troubling year, or at least it's getting off troubling based on this upcoming negotiation, because Abe wants this agreement so badly, not only because they've had the 25 meetings, not only because these islands have gone back and forth like a ping pong ball between the two countries, but his father, when he was Prime Minister, was unsuccessful in negotiating an agreement. So Abe has a lot at stake here. But Abe was indiscreet, I guess you could say, in his New Year's address. He gave notice to the people of these islands that they may have to have a change of sovereignty, and so they'll be under the control of a new country, Japan, and that set off the fury of the Russians. I don't know how somebody so wise as Abe could have been so indiscreet.
Among all other things, Japan is not very weak in ping-pong competitions, but China did deliver ping-pong diplomacy in the early 1990s that laid the groundwork for normalization of the bilateral relationship between Washington and Beijing at the height of the Cold War. Let me cross over to Pavel Fagenhor for his analysis on what would happen during the talks between Putin and Abe. Go ahead, Pavel. Are you optimistic?
Yes, of course. I believe that they'll be discussing different kind of economic projects about Russian-Japanese joint development of the Far East and other fields, and also most likely with these Kuril Islands too. I don't believe there'll be any progress on the island issue right now. If Russian government was really contemplating some kind of compromise, territorial compromise, even on the grounds of the so-called two-island solution, I mean, handing over the lesser chain of Shikotan and Habamai and leaving the other two big islands for the future generations or so, anything like that. Well, that's not coming up too, because if it would be, the Russian government would be already running a publicity campaign to change public opinion. It is not. The Russian public position is that not a centimeter of Russian sovereign territory will be handed over. So on the islands, it's a deadlock, but that does not mean that the relations won't develop. Japan apparently does not want to be left in the cold, while Russia and China are improving more and more their relationship. So for Japan, it's very important to push forward with its kind of charm, diplomacy, and policy with Russia, disregarding is there progress on the islands or not.
Obviously, the future of the four islands would dominate the agenda between the two sides in Moscow, particularly for Shinzo Abe. That's going to be a major issue for domestic politics. Let me go to Professor Takasato Watanabe. Hello, Professor Watanabe. Do you believe?
Hello, thank you.
Do you believe any solution short of a complete transfer of the sovereignty would be utterly unacceptable for the Japanese government in the current negotiations between Moscow and Tokyo?
It is very much complicated because for Russia, almost all the media in here believe that they need economic assistance for the development of the northern parts of that area facing Pacific Ocean. But in Japan, Mr. Abe, he wants to get some support of the young people in Japan, because senior people, most of them, they don't support Mr. Abe now. So he wants to accomplish the diplomatic result, fruit from those negotiations with Russia. So this is very much complicated because Mr. Trump is a little bit not stable, so he doesn't want to support Mr. Abe to the last. If his supporting rate is getting down because of the Russian problems. So these are very much complicated.
Well, Mr. Rong, how complicated is the issue of what is called the Southern Kurils in Russian perspective, but northern territories from the perspective of Tokyo?
Well, it is complicated, of course. If you look at history, that's as long as more than 100 years. I mean, starting from the signing of the treaty between Russia and Japan that time in 1855, the Treaty on Commerce, Navigation, and Delimitation. And that is, for the Japanese perspective, the beginning. That is the beginning indicating that Japan has the sort of the sovereignty or have the right of these islands, including, I think, the four islands. And then, of course, it's also related to history, the World War II history, and 1945, when the Japanese were defeated, and when the relevant documents made Japan to I think, hand over, to announce those territories that has been taken illegally, and that is again the sticking point between Japan and Russia. But because from Russians' perspective, the territory, these 4 islands, the sovereignty belongs to Russia, while the Japanese said that even according to these documents, including the Boston Proclamation, and that is say that Japan had the right to that. So we have a legal question. In addition to the historical background, we had a legal question, the question of legality, and it also have become a political issue, as I said, that since the joint declaration between Soviet and Japan, the Soviet Union at that time agreed that they would hand over or transfer 2 islands.
So long as I'm concerned, there was a landmark document signed in 1956 between Moscow and Tokyo.
Exactly.
What did the document say?
The document did not say specifically about that. The document only said that after the conclusion of the peace treaty, then 2 islands, the small islands, the Shinkutan and Habumai Island, would be sort of transferred to Japan, so as a condition. But later on, I think because of the signing of the Japan-U.S. security alliances, and the Soviet Union changed mind. And then there was another chance, actually, opportunity, that is when the end of Cold War, the collapse of Soviet Union, there was a time that possible, I think Japan and the Soviet Union or Russia could solve the problem. But later on, I think because Japan persistently wanted to have all the 4 islands back, so makes the situation not, I think, things have changed. So what we are looking for me, is not, I think, the transfer, the sovereignty of these 4 islands, even I think the 2 islands, rather is how the Japan and Russia could find a way to address the 2 smaller islands, the jurisdiction or administration that. So that's why I think our Russian colleagues are talking about the joint economic cooperation. So I don't know how far, Shinzo Abe is ready to take that, because after all, these the 2 islands occupies only 7% of the total area, and if that is the case, then 93% of the territories under dispute would be forever gone.
One of the major concerns for Russians, should 2 small islands be handed over to Japan under whatever circumstances, would be the possible establishment of an American military base in one of the 2 islands after the return. So, on the other hand, Harvey, should the Russians agree to hand over these 2 islands in the first place as the first stage, then what about other territories occupied by the Soviets towards the end of the Second World War, such as one that used to belong to Finland? Do you think this proves to be an obsessive concern for Moscow? Things have to be looked at in a broader context.
Well, I think that Moscow always follows the rule, what's mine is mine and what's yours is negotiable. Well, the Russians seem to have most of the marbles right now, and it seems like they want to keep them. And the public opinion in Russia, public opinion poll, over 70% of Russians do not want to give back any territory. And also, Abe has quite a high bar, because 65% of Japanese think that there's going to be a good outcome from this meeting. And I wanted to say, because Professor Watanabe and you alluded to this, there's been a proposal knocking around since the last century about this economic zone that would be shared by both sides, and with the sovereignty not transferred. But this might form a basis, at least, for trying to kick the can down the road, but in a way that would allow both sides to get on with the joint projects that they want to do. There's a lot of cooperation projects that Japan and Russia would like to do, and this might allow it.
Yes, if I may add one point, that is, behind this dispute, there's a big question that whether, from the Russian perspective, and also I think it should be also echoed by the international community, is whether Japan would like to accept the result of the World War II. I mean, there are many international arrangements regarding, particularly regarding the territorial issues, has been now should be accepted. And so for the Russian perspective, the fact that Japan does not accept that means that Japan does not accept the history, the World War II history. This is also echoes very much loud, not only for Russia, but also other countries in the region, including China and other countries in the region.
Let me go back to Professor Watanabe. We've been discussing the Japanese attitude towards the result of the Second World War, and many Chinese here share the same concern with the Russians about whether a defined Japanese government under the LDP would be ready to accept outcome of the Second World War, particularly in terms of the territory. And I'd like to have your hunch.
Mr. Abe, want to get the two northern islands, even if they are very small, because this is symbolical, and economically this doesn't, give the Japanese or a Japanese government the big, benefit, but this is the very keen concern of the Japanese people's public opinion. In addition, when United States and Japan agreed the Security Pact in 1960, actually Mr. Kishi, Mr. Abe's grandfather, told whose document was recently found that Japan should get the Northern Island as soon as possible. It was a hidden agreement between Japan and United States, because United States will return Okinawa Islands if Russia is going to return the Northern Islands. But Russia is worried about so much to be, the base of the American military regime in Northern Ireland. So this is, not so easy to solve. Even, it comes to Japanese territory. If this sovereignty doesn't come, Japanese private sectors of economy, they don't invest. So this is not simple, very difficult to solve completely.
Pavel, what do you make of the response from Professor Watanabe?
Yes, of course. I mean, this territorial issue, legally speaking, is very complicated, but politically and militarily it's not. Russian intentions today, as in the 50s when the Moscow Declaration was signed, are more or less the same. Russia would want to weaken the Japanese-American connection, pull away Japan away from America. To a maybe neutral position, that would be the best, but at least to weaken that alliance. Since that is not happening, Russia does not have much incentive to make any real big compromises. And of course, the Russian military believed that the South Korean islands, Kunashir and Iturup, are essential to defend the positions of the Russian strategic nuclear submarines that are on patrol in the Sea of Okhotsk, to defend them against possible enemy attack. And of course, Japan has also, Japan is not that interested in these islands, like Russia is militarily. It's a very symbolic problem. But Japan politically would want to weaken the Moscow-Beijing axis to pull Russia a bit away in a more balanced position. And that's, again, not really happening right now, which means that there is no real incentive to move forward on the island issue, but there is some to continue to write nice communiques and talk about friendship and actually maybe promote economic development and investment between Russia and Japan, in the hopes that if there's a lot of material interaction, that could also change politics in the end.
Thank you so much. Let me go back to Professor Watanabe. Regarding the issue of
Yes.
long-awaited independence of the Japanese diplomacy, everybody understands that in the wake of the Second World War, not only have the occupation troops from the United States imposed a pacifist constitution on Japan, but your diplomacy remains very much attached to the whims of the U.S. government, particularly after President Donald Trump took office more than 2 years ago. Despite enormous efforts by Prime Minister Shinzo Abe to get close to him, he was always given the cold shoulder from the White House. And therefore, after the pullout from TPP, is it true that Tokyo really wants to have more say on its own diplomacy? And in doing that, since both Pavel and you earlier spoke of the United States, what do you think will happen to the relationship between Washington and Tokyo regarding the diplomatic autonomy, if any, that Tokyo boasts of?
In the post-war period, United States has occupied Japanese direction of diplomacy more than 95%, I believe, and also most of the scholars of this field say like that. I agree with that. However, United States, now you see, they are taking the policy of America first. Mr. Trump doesn't have the global policy on the basis of the equality of each sovereign nations. This is the first difficulty. Second one is Mr. Abe also very emotional, and he wants to, go back to the stage of before 1960, when this new security pact of Japan and the United States was agreed. So Mr. Abe wants to make himself known in the history, but he doesn't know the actual real politics of the global world. China has changed very much, economically developed so much, especially after, U.S. and China normalization of diplomacy. But Japan, actually, they have not, especially Mr. Abe's government, has not, understood this kind of the changes radically, which is moving in the world. This is very serious for Japanese people. So he wants to get the island returned as a symbol to get the more support in the coming election of, this July. This July, the biggest, the election for the upper house is coming. He wants to get the support through this, and he wants to continue the office of the Prime Minister for several years more.
Prime Minister Abe is undoubtedly one of the longest-serving prime ministers of Japan since the end of the Second World War. For one reason or another, does that enable him to, for example, design and build a more independent Japanese diplomacy and foreign policy? For example, last year he came over and normalized the bilateral relationship between Beijing and Tokyo following the disputes over Diaoyu Islands, and he's going to play host to G20 in June, and this time around he went to Moscow. What does he want? I mean, will he make it? Will he easily realize his personal ambition and vision to really become a global power instead of being confined to a regional influence?
Oh, indeed, I think Japan has always been trying its best to find a bigger room, more room for the maneuver among the major powers, despite the fact that it's been an ally of U.S. and U.S.-Japan alliances has been bedrock, have been very cornerstone of Japan's diplomacy. And on many diplomatic issues, in regional international issues, Japan has to, either follow or look at the over the shoulder of itself to see what the Japanese are doing. That's exactly, I think, the reason why Japan wanted to have a state of a relationship, a normal relationship with Russia by concluding, in the hope that concluding this peace treaty, because that would give Japan more rooms. And on the other hand, I think Russia also want to have a normal relationship because it will help Japan, Russia economically, certainly for the development of Far East, and it will also help Russia internationally. By breaking the international isolation. Remember, Japan has done this, not only with Russia, but to some extent with other countries, including China. But they're the limit. They're the limit, I think, they're the limit, and Japan knows very well. And under the current circumstances, when the Trump administration, the diplomacy, policy towards Japan has been now more uncertain and predictable, I think that makes Japan even more eager to pursue that line. But there's always the limit.
Harvey, do you think deliberately the White House has consistently sought to keep potatoes hot, keep the troubles alive in Northeast Asia so that the forward military presence of the American troops would be justified one way or another? And therefore, in this context, Americans show little interest in any remarkable progress that should be made between Tokyo and Moscow on the future of the 4 northern islands.
I don't think that America is focused on that. I think they have other bigger fish to fry. I think that Trump is in love with Kim Jongun and has jilted Shinzo Abe. And I think Japan will have to try very hard to get back in a kind of superior position, but he is trying. I empathize with Shinzo Abe, though, because dealing with Trump is so unpredictable. That's I think the kindest thing we could say about it. He doesn't really focus on big issues, and he doesn't pay much attention to this one. Prime Minister Abe tried so hard to win the trust of President Trump. He was the first person to visit him after the election.
Despite the painful handshake.
Yeah, right, exactly. So I don't think the United States is focusing on Japan at the moment, quite frankly.
Pavel, are you with us, or do you follow what we've been talking about? What do you think of the American influence on the formulation of Japanese diplomacy? Do you think long-term Japan will win more autonomy and recognition from the rest of the world by keeping a distance somehow from the White House? Will it be an easy job or very difficult?
Well, I don't right now see how Japan is actually could have do that, or the present Japanese government and maybe the future, I don't know. But right now they're not moving away from the United States. They see Washington as the only bulwark that can, in the last resort, defend them if there's some kind of trouble happening there in the Far East with China in particular. So I don't see right now any major realignments in the Far East. There's attempts to do that from all sides, but the situation is rather strategically stable. It's going to stay. Trump is here right now as president. He won't be most likely after 20. Of course, no one knows for sure. But anyway, the basics of the American-Japanese connection are not changing anytime soon.
Well, thank you so much. That's a wonderful discussion about the future of islands in dispute between Moscow and Tokyo, as well as the future of Japan's diplomatic independence, if Prime Minister Abe does have that vision. Thank you, everybody. Rongying, Harvey, Pavel, and Watanabe. I'll see you next time. Goodbye.